Hello, I'm Tim Clark, Global Editor-in-Chief of PC Gamer. I'm joined by Pete Hines from Bethesda, marketing mastermind, and also big Elder Scrolls Legends fan. It's a passion project for you, Pete.
It is.
I think last time we spoke, you were chatting to my colleague Tom Marks at PAX, discussing the game and saying we could go into full release almost any time. When's the game going into full release?
Almost any time.
Okay.
I'm nothing if not consistent.
Okay.
A lot of what we've been working on the last couple of months has actually had a lot more to do with things that aren't the game and are back-end process stuff that affects your ability to interact with the game, but isn't actually like, can I play cards and spells and go back and forth and play a game? So that's honestly a lot of what we've focused on. We've done 2 so far this month. Changes to the card file and kind of trying to make sure that the metagame is leveled. We did a massive update in January that was also tons of just little bugs. Like we felt like pretty good about like actual bugs, but there's a lot of fringe cases and little things that were annoying. We have a few things left on our map for February, and then I'm hopeful that we're going to be to the point of getting after it and coming out of beta, which to the consumer, to you or me or anybody playing or thinking about playing, it will be transparent. Like it'll literally make no difference. We're not resetting anything. It's just, honestly, it's things that like on the iPad, can we create an account for you behind the scenes so that you can start playing? Because it turns out on a PC or on a laptop, if you have to fill out a few fields to create an account, no big deal. But on an iPad where you're hunting and pecking and doing this, like it turns into an arduous process that we just felt like was bad for a mobile experience.
So I'm hearing March.
I am hopeful that in March that we're not only going to be talking about being launched on PC, but that we'll also have more info on other platforms, and then more news beyond that. Because what I'm really excited about for this year is features and functionality. When are we going to get a really meaty new set of cards? We had the Madhouse collection in December, which added some cool stuff, and it's great to see people working those into a variety of decks. You and I were talking before we came on that I've been playing a Gardener deck, a Gardener of Swords deck that's been a lot of fun to play. But something substantive. We want a larger set of cards to get our hands on, and so I'm excited about talking about those kinds of things here.
Because we've had the Chaos Arena add-on, which is coming back as well. Mm-hmm. Is it conceivable then that there could be like a big paid expansion before the game's out of beta?
Before, probably not, but they're also not. They're not mutually exclusive. Like we can be working on multiple things at once, and there's a lot of stuff right now that we're doing in terms of getting ready for a new expansion, more cards, getting ourselves ready for other platforms, getting ourselves out of beta on PC, working on additional features and functionality. There's lots of stuff that we want you to be able to do in the game, or the spectator mode, or what kind of support do we have formally for tournaments, or whatever those things are. There's a lot of stuff that we want to do, and being able to start to talk about when those are coming and how they're going to work. Even something like Chaos Arena that you mentioned, we did it in December. We brought it back for a weekend in January, but I think we'd like to grow and evolve what that looks like. That each time it comes back, maybe it's a little different, or offers new modes or ways to draft or whatever. Doing more with playing up lanes and lane conditions. Ultimately, I think it'd be fun if Tim, you and I wanted to play a competitive best 2 out of 3 where we each got to pick one set of lane conditions that we played a match on. Stuff like that, I think, is on a very long list of things that we want to do. It's just a question of what's the order to get them done in, and how quickly can we get them done.
Given that you guys have done you've done some pack giveaways so far, you've had some high profile streamers kind of playing sponsored, what do you think is kind of the best route to really expanding the Legends audience? Because I think that's why people are interested, because you're right, the game now is effectively launched, right? Mm-hmm. It's out. But I think people are keen to know, like, when's that kind of explosion in audience going to come, and they're waiting for like the Bethesda kind of advertising machine to crank into gear?
Honestly, I think number one on our list is getting out of beta on PC and getting out on those other platforms. We've done surveys of players and talked to players, and it's a huge thing where folks are like, I'm waiting on iPad, or I'm waiting on Android tablets or phones or Mac or whatever it is. That there's a ton of people out there who are interested in playing the game on other platforms, particularly ones where it's easy for them to take it on the go. I got an hour commute. I'd love to be able to sit on my tablet and play in the morning. So that's certainly a big thing for us. And you're right. Like we've done some things here and there, but we've really kind of been holding back on doing a lot of formal advertising until we feel like we get the game to a point where it's accessible to a wider variety of players.
Quite a few players that I've sort of spoken to and have seen talking about this seem to be attracted to Legends by the fact that there was a perception the game had a bit more depth than Hearthstone because of the lane system, and that also it was less aggro-centric, which a lot of people felt, I think, frustrated about who played Hearthstone a lot. More recently, I've seen people saying that they feel like the Elder Scrolls meta has sped up, and there's been kind of issues with, you guys have been definitely more proactive in terms of balancing cards more regularly. Where do you feel in that kind of spectrum?
In general, what I would like to see, and my hope is that we just have a great amount of diversity, that trying to go aggro is viable, and mid-range is viable, and control and long game and combo stuff is viable, but none of them have vastly higher win rates or expectancies against any of the other colors, right? So, which ends up meaning, to your point, that you can't just squeeze aggro out of the game entirely, because now you've cut off an entire range of decks and cards that go with those decks. So that's not a good thing. What you try and avoid is, your probability of winning with an aggro deck is 70%, and if you play a mid-range or a combo deck, it's 55%. Like, that's where the actual problem is. It's not that you can win with an aggro deck, it's just that if your chances of winning with that are about the same as any other deck, then you end up getting the nice mix, which is where I think we want to be. And to your point, I want us to be able to tout and celebrate having strategic depth, having a lot of variety of gameplay, having a game where attacking is not always the smart move. Like, I think that is an interesting piece of friction that I feel all the time. Ability to sort of adjust on the fly and to always kind of have to evaluate, should I be attacking here because it's necessary, or am I better off just trying to stay alive and draw this game out, because then I'm going to pull off this combo later on where I have a Gardener and I have a Dres Tormentor out and I play a Master of Arms and I get multiple shackles and I'm dealing 3 to a bunch of stuff and he can't attack and I got big huge things, and then I drop another Master of Arms and it's just like my opponent's like, oh my god, like what just happened? But that doesn't.
They run installing after Pete,
right?
After Pete, you might
but that doesn't always work, and in those situations, like, your opponent's at 28 and you've got 4 guys out, and like passing the turn back might be the right thing to do instead of doing 8 damage and letting them draw 2 more cards that might let them push that final few points of damage through. So I find that friction there, that tension, really interesting. I do think it adds strategy and depth along with the lanes, and I think that's where we want to be, of a wide variety of decks of different types that are all viable and worthy, and are more based on the skill of the player and not just I put these cards in a deck and it just wins.
Yeah, I mean that definitely, that tension in Hearthstone of like how much RNG is too much has been, I think, again, like a point of differentiation with Legends. Like, Legends clearly has cards like Wabberjack, which are like, they're big RNG cards.
Yep.
But like, for sure, if you look at the Reddit and stuff, there's a flavour of people kind of, I think, generally not wanting to see the same level of like yachts.
Yeah, well, and it's important that I've had this discussion with folks on Reddit a couple of times, which is that there's a difference between randomness and variance and RNG.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's too much RNG, the cards that say if the top card of your deck is the same color as this. Like, I'm like, yeah, that's not RNG. Like, that's a mechanic that if you were playing with physical cards,
that's card games.
You would just look at the top and, right, like, yes, there's variance there, there's randomness there, but RNG is where you would, anytime you'd literally be rolling a dice to figure out the outcome. Like, give every creature you control a random keyword. Like, yeah, that's RNG. Or the Wabberjack, like, turn it into some random, like, but
you have to build your deck as well in such a way that you think you're going to be ahead on life when it comes to you playing that card, and likewise with the allied cards, right? It's up to you how much you're stacking.
And I think a little bit of that is fun and is okay, and I think right now the amount that we have is fine, because it's there's really not many, if any, that I'm aware of. I confess I'm not super up on the meta, like RNG-based deck, where it's just a bunch of like you roll dice or flip coins and get super lucky and you win. It's more about finding good synergies and finding cards that pull well together. It's much more important to have, an orc deck that just cares about other orcs and buffs if you have orcs, than it is to have something that says like, get a bunch of random abilities and sometimes they all get lethal and you just win, but those just don't seem to come together very often. I
think that when like Prophecy Assassin was at its best, that could be quite frustrating to face down, because you did feel like, well, I have to break his runes, but when I break his runes,
he's going to draw something.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be an interesting challenge for Direwolf down the line, when just the density of prophecy cards becomes such that you really can like fill out an even bigger portion.
Yep, no question. It's something
that's their problem to worry about.
That's right. Well, the good news is that like I have a ton of faith. I've gotten to know those guys pretty well. Some of them I knew and followed a little bit as Magic players, and I've gotten to know them all pretty well over the last couple years. I've chatted with them and done shows and played with them, and they are to a person all really smart strategy card players and really smart strategy card designers, and I think they have a good sense for maintaining a game that has a healthy balance and a healthy mix. And again, it's not like let's eliminate this kind of ability or strategy. It's just let's make sure it doesn't have a higher chance to win than a whole bunch of other viable options.
It's been really interesting watching how active they are in terms of balancing the game. Like you said, like more than one balance pass potentially sometimes in the same month. And I was kind of surprised when in the most recent patch, I think was the one where they changed the two Khajiit moving cards, like Gene Smuggler and I forget the other one's name. And some of the talk around that was that because those cards weren't seen actually as like particularly obnoxious, that was being done because there was a new mechanic coming. There's talk of something called flanking, where maybe creatures get more power depending on what's in the lane opposite to them and stuff.
Well, that's a thing. That flanking lane is something that was in Chaos Arena, right? Where you play a card here and it gives +1,
but that
+0.
being brought into the main game, I mean.
Sure, but the main thing that they emphasized was, look, we are trying to make sure that the way that we template talking about what cards do is straightforward and consistent. And so in the case of I just forgot. No, it's the yellow one that destroys it. Templated change went from destroy any creature to destroy an enemy creature in this lane. The Manticore, right?
Yeah.
Is an example of like, okay, well,
that's a good change, by the way.
Right, but that's a power shift, right? Because you couldn't do the thing of, well, I'm going to place it in the lane with your second best creature and kill your first best creature in the other lane.
That sucked.
But it is also the more cards that have different versions of that, the more confusing it actually is to players, right? That if you're using more language that says, like, this does a thing to another creature in this lane, the more consistent you are, whether you're targeting your own creature or the other enemy creature, you're removing the chance for confusion or to somebody to go like, wait, what does that card do again? So I think it is something that they think about in terms of making sure that cards are kind of using the same language to explain what it is that they do. I'll be perfectly honest, I have no idea whether or not this is related to cards or mechanics that are coming in upcoming sets or releases, but I do know at a basic level that they want to avoid things that have areas of fuzziness or that are a little unclear, or cards that are doing kind of the same thing but kind of different at the same time.
Is it strange that, because obviously like with a game like Hearthstone, that's obviously an internal team at Blizzard, but this is you're in partnership with Direwolf, but they have like another card game in Eternal they're working on. Does that make it, and that seems like as someone on the outside that would create like almost a conflict, because they're trying to promote two things that are in the same space.
Right. Well, I mean, it is theirs. If you've played it, the game that they have is very different from ours. I played a healthy amount of Eternal, and it feels much closer on the spectrum to Magic in terms of playing interrupts and quick actions and things on your opponent turn, actually assigning blockers, like you don't attack the other player, you just attack and then the other player decides who to block and how. But the basic thing is we're working together collaboratively on this thing, and when it comes to the promotion and marketing and all that stuff, that's down to that's down to my team. That's down to us at Bethesda, and obviously they work with us on that. But we're supposed to be the ones, as the publisher, as it should be, saying this is what we want to do and when and how. When it comes to something else, if they're making it and they're doing those decisions on the development side, well, it's not like I'm deciding which one to promote or not. Like one of those is under my control and one isn't.
One of the things coming to it from Hearthstone, obviously, like a bigger deck size, 50. You usually can play 50 or more cards.
A minimum of 50, right? In constructed, yeah.
So one of the things that was a shock to me was that you could run 3/ofs of like even legendary cards, some legendary cards if they weren't unique.
Some of them.
And I remember like I was trying to build a sorcerer deck at the time, which had like obviously a net deck that had like 3 Daggerfall mages, and I was like, oh my god, like this is going to cost me like a pretty penny to run. Are you comfortable with like people's ability to compete? Like the new player experience gets talked a bit quite a lot, and obviously like the people who've been playing in the closed beta now, it feels like there's a pretty hardcore, like even like down the ladder where I am, you're coming up against very kind of like competitive decks.
Yeah.
Does that worry you that for people coming in, like you say, when you launch tablets and stuff, they may find it?
I think eventually that stuff will shake its stuff out. That new players obviously should be playing against folks who have similar types of decks, similar power level decks, and I hope that as we come in that we find that. I mean, obviously there's going to be a point at which you start to run up against stuff that just seems like, wow, that's a much more powerful. But honestly, most of the time when I'm playing, I don't even remember where I am right now, Tim. I think I'm at like 5 or 6, because I just prefer arena to playing battle mode. But even at 5 or 6, I play matches against folks that are rank 2. They're several levels ahead of me, and I still feel like I either win or it's right down to the wire where.
But is that a worry itself that the audience is now spread out enough? Because I'm like maybe like 9 or 8, and I'll queue against people like 4 and 5 at the moment. And it didn't used to be like that when I first started playing. It would tend to be only over like
I
one
think
rank
part of that
difference.
is just kind of the cyclical nature of like when our concurrency goes up or is higher, or I've even noticed like there's certain times a day where I'll just get the same rank as me match after match after match, and then there's other times a day where like I'm playing 2 up or 2 down or whatever. I think it's you're feeling that more than anything. But yeah, obviously that's something that we're mindful of and certainly plan to keep an eye on. But the hope is when you get a lot more people in, that's also going to give people more fodder to push them up higher into the higher ranks and kind of leave behind the 12, 11, 10, 9 for those folks to get some experience. But look, the other thing is in a card game, like, well, if it can't be too easy forever. Like we can't just say like, hey, everybody gets to win, pretty easily up to rank 7. Like, well, then rank 12 through 8 mean nothing.
You shouldn't expect to have a tier 1 deck necessarily straight away.
Right,
either.
like you need to be able to play through, be competitive, and then hopefully get a point where you feel like, okay, like there's some stuff I'm missing or some ways in which I want to improve this deck, but along the way you've gotten some rewards, you've done quests, you've got more soul gems or packs or whatever it is to start finding or crafting the cards that you want to help improve your deck.
It's quite generous as well in the sense that you can get soul gems from playing the practice mode and stuff, which I think is often like it can be intimidating to queue against. People get ladder anxiety and stuff to queue against
for sure.
Real people. One of the things I actually like best about the game is the way the ladder is structured, insofar as you don't drop out of the rank you're in. And I found that like when I was playing it a lot, I was able to get to that legend a couple of months in a row without feeling too stressed.
Yep.
Because you drop into the serpent.
And you sort of stay there, and you have this other ability of...
It's like a limbo of temporary sucking.
Yeah, and you can try some other deck, like you get a daily quest, like, win X matches with yellow-purple, but that's not what you've been playing. Like, yeah, I might actually, like, I've been thinking about this yellow-purple deck, and I'll try it, and if I lose 5 in a row, like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay here. Like, I do think that's of benefit as opposed to, like, I have to play the best deck I have always, otherwise, I'm going to lose all this progress and go careening back down. That's not a feel good.
There's no title for getting legend though. There's titles for every single thing in the game, getting the pastry chef and all that sort of stuff. But there's nothing, I think, for getting the top rank. Right?
That's true.
It needs to be put in.
Okay.
And applied retrospectively.
Got it.
Cool.
Noted.
Thanks for your time,
Absolutely.
Pete.
Thank
really
you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Check out Elder Scrolls Legends. It's in closed beta now. Easy to
you can
jump
go to
into.
Bethesda.net, download and start playing, and hopefully come in, as we talked about, to other platforms soon.